Hey, Pussy, new little video. So on this one, on the last one, we discussed the approach on for the medicine, and we talked about if you had to do first aid, to still do your first aid, and then ask your question a little bit later. And so on this one, I want to talk a little bit. I obviously won't talk about the first aid course because we don't have 16 hours and stuff. And we talk about, I did a few videos in the past on what kind of first aid course you should take and stuff like this. But on this one, I'm going to show you more about a little bit of modification of the ABC, which you're probably familiar with, as well as show you the kit that I carry and is separated from my first aid kit, and I'll explain to you the reason of why it is like this. But first, before you show you what's in my kit, let's go through what I would consider it like left straightening. So basically what we're talking about is when you want to do first aid versus care. Like we made a little bit difference, and obviously those are not pure definition. They're pretty much more in our head to try to make a difference between what we're doing and stuff. But on first aid, basically, yeah, you're aiding. So basically, there's self-threatening things, and most first aid course always teach you the A, B, C. Over here, we'll have two of them, E, D, and as well as E. And some course will go like this, some other course will say different. I'll mix some of their emotions, but it's more to understand. I won't do a list of this. Actually, I will do a PDF. Now I'm thinking about it. I'll put that in PDF so that you can have a list of things that you can do and stuff. Yeah. So the first A, we'll have a few things in the A. So airway, like mostly you've learned, but we'll also have anaphylaxis on this one as well. Anaphylactic shock, as most people know, is basically what you have is you have an allergic reaction to something, and you can create. It is an emergency because when you get it, so there's a difference between an allergic reaction and an anaphylactic. Allergic reaction is just when you react to something. So for example, if I'm allergic to a new detergent and I put it on my skin, I may have a rash on my skin. But I won't go into anaphylactic shock or anaphylactic stuff. So anaphylactic and allergy. So for example, when you go outside and you have runny nose because the pollen in the air, you're allergic to pollen. You're not anaphylactic to it. Anaphylactic would mean that you have two or more, and I repeat, two or more system involved. Meaning system, respiratory, GI, or things like that. Those, when you get into this, as per definition, is that where you need to have the epinephrine. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about anaphylaxis. Airway maintenance, and then this one is opening the airway, suctioning airway. So those would be the two different things that you can have. So in our kits, we need to have different things for airway. We will probably do, actually in the care section, a whole section. I did a video on airway when I talked in the past about my first aid kit and why I carry what I carry and stuff like this. But I will do another one just in the conjunction of, again, in self-reliance medicine, because it is important to understand. A lot of people, for example, from YouTube, when I look at videos, they will have intubation kits and stuff. There's a lot of questions to be asked about that. First of all, it's not just airway. In that case, we're getting more into breathing, but we'll be a little bit more technical on that later. But the thing is that if you're opening it, we're only talking about here about somebody who's unconscious and we need to open the airway. But we'll do another video on the more when we do and stuff, and we'll talk a little bit when we go into video. On the B, the breathing, So we'll talk about different things here. Trauma, for example, pneumothorax, pneumothorax, but mostly pneumothorax. Pneumothorax is not much you'll be able to do out there, but pneumothorax they'll be able to do, and especially one we call tension pneumothorax, which means that your pneumothorax is breathing. Pneumothorax, I mean, that's the opening. Lets air out, so their air has a way to get in. But the tension of pneumothorax means that the air doesn't have a way to get out, and there's a tension it creates inside of you. And this one you have to create something, and usually what we do is a needle decompression. And so in the kit we'll show you, I do carry something for that purpose only. Also in B, burns. And we're not talking about just burning your finger or something like that. We're talking about major burns here. Major burns and stuff will be another ones that it's a big emergency that you need to carry something on you. It's hard to know obviously in a kit, because it'll be like very large and everything, but more like if you're suspected, for example, if you're about to go, for example, let's say you would have a generator that has that you're about to put fuels or something into it, because like that's how your house is working out, and because you don't have electricity anymore or something like this. Well, another way that it's not just about your first aid kit, but also the prevention of the burn. So for example, at the site you could have like a kit. So for example, when we fly the helicopter we were landing, there's always an extinguisher somewhere. And so there's a locker, and it's on lock just before we land. So that way, if something happens, then they would be able to take the extinguisher. Obviously, we're talking about a big, big thing, a big fire. But that kind of prevention can be part of your B. So if you know that you're about to do something that is susceptible to have burn, maybe have a burn kit or an extinguisher or something like this, or sand or something like this that you have around, that in case something happens, that way you'll be able, because to carry the real kit that you would need in your first aid kit, it would be too big, because most likely what you would need is something to stop the fire. So if there's still full fire, that means a blanket or something like this, or an extinguisher. So that would be one of those kind of stuff. So breathing, burns. C, we're talking about CPR. And here let's say it's in C, but we'll talk about major bleed as well. But circulation usually is where you talk about major bleed, but because of the B. So airway anaphylactic breathing, burns, bleeds, CPR. So it's circulation, usually that's where you start looking for bleeds and stuff like this. And obviously this is not like how to approach it, but the kind of stuff that you need to think when you're going to have your first aid kit. That first aid kit separately, that's the kind of stuff you want to have them in it. And again, we talk about birds. That one would be a little bit hard, but have at least a kit when you're susceptible to have big incidents of burns, something like that. So CPR is another one. So if you have to do CPR, it's to have the proper kit on you all the time and be able to do those things. D. Usually it's for disability. So for example, we're talking about a decreased level of consciousness and things like that. Usually that's when we use, but also we'll use it here as so decontamination. I don't want to write all the way up there. So basically, if you have someone that is full of pepper spray or something like this, you need to decon, so that you need to clean them out before you can do anything. And it becomes an emergency because those people, let's say they're outside, for whatever reason, you're caught somewhere and they got sprayed with pepper spray. If you bring that in your house, you just contaminated your whole house. All this will go in. For example, those people that are full of just fuel. So for example, if they're in a car accident and they're full of fuel, we're not allowed to bring them in the back of the helicopter. And so they had to be decontaminated by water. So anything that they're not coming in the back, because then they become in danger for all the 4 people that are in the back of that chopper. So So that's another issue. So when you're talking about D, think about that, about the decontamination of what you're doing. So again, have a kit and something prepared so that you can start thinking about decontamination if you're expecting something like this. And we'll probably do something special on overdose, and in the overdose as well, we're talking about organophosphate and other product you may encounter, tear gas or pepper spray, those ones, and how we can use some products to decontaminate the contents of decontamination. So D for decontamination is BT, and E is for exposure, and mostly those ones is environmental. So that means hypothermia and hyperthermia. So, and those ones, this becomes like pretty much like the big stuff. You also in the airway, I just saw that now. I knew I was missing one. Is asthma, and so the three. So if we recapitulate it, the 3A is airway, anaphylactic, and asthma. The B would be breathing. So any breathing issues, and we talk about mostly trauma, so pneumothorax or tachypneas or COPD exacerbation or things like that. So having trouble breathing, obviously you'll have to do something with that. Burns, to have a kit and stuff. Bleeds, major bleed, usually goes to C, but it's just because of the bleed. It just sounds better to go there. C for the CPR. So basically do your stuff right away there if you have to do something about it. D is for disability, so if they're having strokes or if they're having a seizure or something like this, something that detects their neuro, you may have to do a little of an approach before that. So for example, the seizure, you'll have to let them do their thing, and then after that it would become like an airway issue and stuff. But mostly the D is here for decon, and basically don't forget that to clean them before you can bring them anywhere. And the exposure is for hypothermia and hyperthermia mostly. So carry something in your kit that you can have. So for those kits, what I carry is a little box like this, and basically this is the Pelican 1040 micro case kit. As you can see, it's not that bad. So basically this on my hands, see, it's pretty much like the size of my hand and about thickness of my thumb here. And inside this I carry everything. This is crush proof, waterproof, and it floats as well. And I think I did a video in the past where I put that in the stream and can show. And basically what I carry in this, pair of glove, bleeding and all that other stuff, and tourniquet, and this is the sweat in T. And the reason I carry this one is that because it can be used for different purpose. It can be used for strain, it can be used for dressing, tourniquet, elastic wrap, pressure dressings. So for example, for bleed, I can use it first of all for pressure dressing, and if that doesn't work, then I can change it for a tourniquet. So that's one here. And then for airway, I got three kind of airways. I got the nasopharyngeal airway, so basically this one goes through your nose like this. I got the oropharyngeal airway, so this one goes into your mouth, and then over here is like almost like a pocket mask. Basically you put this in your mouth, a little bit like a hockey playing there, and then you can give your mouth to mouth over here. And I got my improvised safety pin, so if I got way more than 1 to 2 people, or I have very severe airway that I need to manage and stuff, I can go through the tongue and attach it through the lips. And so that's another airway here. Over here is my chest pain CPR kind of stuff. And so basically here I got my mask, a pair of gloves. I got another micro shields and a pair of gloves. And so basically now I can do my whole CPR.